Welcome, everyone. Today, I want to discuss health and ethics in Aristotle. And I'll do so simply by, reading from my book on eudaimonia in Aristotle, which was published earlier this year. This is my first foray into self-publishing. So I've set up the Halcyon publication named after my Halcyon Academy. And if you'd like to get a copy of Eudaimonia, Human Flourishing and Divine Telos in Aristotle's Ethics, then follow the link to Amazon in the description of this video and get your hardcover copy, which, as you can see, looks like this. You've got Apollo dancing with the muses here. Okay, so I'm going to read from section 15 in the introduction, or rather the first chapter on ethos, telos, eudaimonia. And it's striking that Aristotle again and again makes reference to health in the Nicomachean Ethics, and he does so very often in context of what ethos is, character or ways of conduct, how to shape one's character, etc. And that there may very well be true, or let's say right propositions, logoi, sentences, etc. But the question is always, how do those principles translate over into the concrete situation? Or do they at all? Or is there not rather always a tension between the two? And what it is not so much a question of what comes first, whether it's the experience or, let's say, the category or the proposition or the principle, as different as they are, but instead that there's something in between them that generates that co-generates or co-responds to the specific moment, in which then something shows itself by itself. For example, the specific illness or ailment that the patient suffers from, and that then leads to the right response in the kairos, in the moment. So instead of a technicized medicine that we have today, where, for example, in psychiatry, everyone has to have, anyone who goes to see a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist must have a specific psychological illness that can be diagnosed according to certain frameworks. And hence, this is, with an Aristotelian medicine, this would be impossible. So again, the same that what's true for health is true for ethics as well. And I'd like to point out also that we have a course on health and virtue, a journey to wellness with Plato and Aristotle. The link to that course is in the description of this video as well, if you'd like to join the course and start considering and thinking about what health really is, especially in the digital age, in the age of quantity, to use this notion from René Guénon, in the age of Gestell, as Heidegger might say. What is Gestell? Gestell is the enframing, the positioning of all beings so that they stand ready as a resource, including the human being. And so health is one parameter which needs to be optimized for, or of course also which needs to be, perhaps even the opposite is the case also, that we need to produce unhealthy human beings so that big pharma can make a profit, or that you can get people hooked on certain medication, for example, diabetics, or more recently, fat loss medication that destroys your muscle mass if you take it. So this is section 15. If you have the book, you can read along. Consider, I begin this section as follows. All our actions, projects, methods, inquiries, choices pursue a good and involve some degree of thinking or taking into consideration, being mindful or aware of something. So we never just act purely on instincts, I would say. Yeah. As long as those are genuine human actions. While highest thinking thinks only itself, and this is not where we need to go here, this is not divided, however, from the rest, let's say, of thinking, quote unquote, the rest of thinking. It is the content that changes. In fact, there are no different kinds of thinking separate from each other. Now consider health as an example of practical concern. While practical, the physician will still have to think to a certain degree. And consider this, for example. What is the principle of health? That doesn't change. The principle of health is to heal the patient. Once medicine or the medical profession forgets that, they're no longer, they're doctors in name only, or GPs in name only. They're not, in fact, any longer engaging in medicine. Quite simple. So will the physician, the doctor, etc., have to contemplate health in itself? Or will he rather consider which tools and remedies might contribute to healing his patient who sits in front of him? In more general terms, the art and science of medicine, with its particular means, serves the good of being healthy. The physician who wishes to heal a patient will have to take into consideration the following all at once: established scientific facts together with the art of medicine. And the art of medicine is something more imprecise even than the so-called science. The art of medicine, the art of healing, can in turn only be learned properly from and in experience. Together, all this with the specific patient and his or her ailment. The physician will have to ask and ponder what health is. Not so much what health is in itself, as to say, as an abstract universal concept. Still, his guiding and implicit question will always be, even if the physician doesn't actually ever articulate this fully, the guiding question is, what is health? But what is it in this particular situation also? A right logos, which we today might think of as a scientific theory, might very well prove to be wrong or even misleading given the specific suffering of a patient. This is how you end up in misdiagnosis, etc. And this is where the art, however, which is here the original meaning of techne, not as techniques or technology, but techne really as a what we might refer to as an imprecise art, but perhaps of a precision all of its own, one that cannot be captured by quantified measurement. So this is where the art then of medicine must come in, which is something other than just technique or technical tools. The art of medicine is rather concerned with the good appropriate to it, that is to say, health. The art of medicine leads according to its good, which is health, which is not a state that one can simply reach and then maintain forevermore, but the appropriate balance of the body given its condition. So experience and logos go together. Now, something briefly on the word theory. So why do we still speak of theory today, even in the first place? And this is sort of the main thrust of the book. This is the main argument of the book, is that there is not that much, or let's say that theoria and praxis for Aristotle belong deeply together, and that there is no split of theory and praxis in Aristotle at all, as the tradition has come to believe. Because theoria is is a field of vision. It's something that lets something be seen at the highest degree. That's divine. But we speak of a scientific theory because it lets us see something. Now, Goethe remarks in one of his maxims that, quote, theories are usually precipitations of an impatient understanding that wants to get rid of the phenomena. So this is what theory has been corrupted towards, what theory has been reduced to. But theoria in the proper sense is precisely not impatient. It is not trying to put someone or something into a Procrustes bed. Instead, what it's trying to do is to let something be seen in and of its own accord. And hence, you would arrive at a proper and good diagnosis that brings together the logos that is specific to that moment and also the specific experience and the specific suffering of the patient in question. And Aristotle very often draws these analogies between health and ethics in the Nicomachean Ethics, precisely because in ethics, it's quite similar. You can't just learn by heart the virtues and the vices and always try to be perfectly somewhere in the golden mean. That is not how ethics works. It's not really about working at all. It's about finding the right response in the right moment. For example, courage is always a response that is extreme. Yeah, courage is not imbalanced. You are responding in a situation with an extreme response, not to be reckless, that would be overly extreme. Yes, Aristotle does say this. But to be courageous means to respond in a way that is already extreme. If you consider any sort of situation that is outside a situation that requires courage from you. So, again, I'd like to invite you to join the Philosophy of Health course, and which will guide you on a journey to wellness with Plato and Aristotle, on the relationship between health and virtue. And Thomas Chocken, who's developed the course and who's teaching the course, makes the point very strong that we should understand health in terms of analogy, and also our body in terms of analogy, that hand and arm and leg and brain and digestive system and eyes and ears and all of our senses, etc., and our minds and brains are all analogous to each other and only make sense in terms of analogy. So that's how a certain unity comes together. And by the way, one of the ways I translate arete in this book here, which is usually translated either as character or for the most part as virtue, arete is unification. So in health, we try to unify the conditions of our body into a unified, evolving, healthy substance. And yeah, there's also a link to the book Eudaimonia. Eudaimonia, I understand as familiarity of the world, how the world can become familiar to us. And of course, that requires a genuine polis, which currently perhaps we don't have, but which we perhaps also should build towards. So thank you very much for listening.